Hello, BookTube. I was out here in the kitchen of Hyde Cottage yelling at another bookcase full of books and tearing it apart like a mad vandal as I grapple with my print and paper book collection here at Hyde Cottage. When it occurred to me that as long as I'm tearing apart the bookcase, I might as well do a bookshelf tour. You seem to like that, and Lord knows there are a million that I could do. It would take me a whole year to do that. So I thought we'd go through. I've got a gigantic bookcase here of mass market paperbacks that are double stacked, and they're not organized in any appreciable way. They've been shifted and yelled at and torn apart a million times. So I thought we'd go through some of those as a partial bookshelf tour. There is no way for me to do even a whole bookshelf tour of even this one bookshelf because there's just too many things. We'll start off with Ellie Modicet. This is The Magic of Recluse. This is a mass market paperback of the first book in the Recluse series. It is a fantasy novel, a bunch of characters. The cover artwork is a Darrell K. Sweet. It's a bunch of characters on a muddy road in the rain. That's it. There's nothing dramatic at all. It's just a bunch of characters on horseback with a carriage in the rain. It's possible that the driver is supernatural, but that's it. That's all. That's all we get. Darrell K. Sweet sort of degenerated in his cover artwork, mainly on the artwork for the Wheel of Time series, but also everywhere else. He degenerated into just doing this, into just, it's a fantasy novel, but I'm just going to draw a picture. That's all. I don't know. It's very good artwork, but it's a very poor fantasy novel cover. It's just a bunch of people standing around on horseback. But I recently got the mass market paperback, or relatively recently. All of these things are relatively recent, because it intrigued me. The rereading the series intrigues me. Then another series that I have as an ebook. I don't need to reread these anytime soon, although it's always tempting. This is book number 2 of the Journeys of Migel Fen by Kevin O'Donnell. A science fiction series that never did continue. It continued to book 4 and then stopped. I wish it hadn't. I wish it had gone a long, long way further than that. And it's about the main character here, that young man in the coat of many colors there is a flinger. A group of mutants they're very rare, and they have the ability to transport up to a very specific certain limit of weight from one location to another instantaneously by the force of their mutation. So no shipping costs. No bundling costs, no nothing like that, no transport. Which means that flingers are an extremely well-compensated professional class, and they go into a booth all day long and just fling things all day long for money. Until their talent starts to fall apart. Once their talent starts to become unreliable, of course, they go from being the most useful people in the galaxy to the deadliest people in the galaxy. And then, what they tend to do is ring the changes of another flinger, actuate the power of a new flinger, a young flinger, usually a baby. And then once they're sure that they've done that and that flinger is on the road to joining the academy and eventually becoming their replacement, the flinger whose talent is decomposing, they fling themselves into the sun. And this, believe it or not, despite the weird tangent that I used to describe that, these are hilarious books. And also incredibly good. They're incredibly sharp. I don't know why they're not better known. I have all of the volumes in paperback, and they're all scattered all around because there's no order to anything here. Because my books are out of control. They are completely out of control. Here we have the old University of Chicago Press paperback of the Judge D mysteries. Medieval Chinese judge who solves crimes. Was a real, quasi-real folkloric figure. And these novels are by Robert Van Gulik, who translated an ancient text called The Cases of Judge D. But then decided, this character would also make a good fictional version, a fictional protagonist in a series of murder mysteries. So he did that, and they are wonderful. And this is the Chinese Bell Murders, which is the longest Judge D story. And these are very distinctive in look. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. Let's line these up on the corner. These University of Chicago paperbacks are wider. They are square instead of rectangular. So they're taller, a little bit taller, and a little bit wider. And unfortunately, they're also poorly made. The text block is held onto the covers by a dot of ink, a dot of glue, maybe more than that. So they don't hold up. They don't hold up to significant rereading. That's why I'm glad to have all of them as ebooks, so I don't have to worry about glue that's made out of dead animals. I don't have to worry about that. Here's another one from that same set. This is the Chinese Gold Murders. I don't think I have all of these. Once upon a time, I had all of these in paperback, but I tend to send them out as gifts. And as long as we're talking about poorly made mass market paperbacks, which we weren't, but we can now, this is Foul Play Press. For a long time, they did a complete set of Phoebe Atwood-Taylor's Cape Cod mysteries, starring A.Z. Mayo, her main character, sort of Socrates in bib overalls, a kind of an old salt, a Cape Cod old salt, who's also really, really good at solving murder mysteries. They did everything. They did the whole of that series. This is Banbury Bog. These things had two distinguishing characteristics. These old Foul Play Press paperbacks had two distinguishing characteristics. One was unbelievably ugly covers. Just white covers with juvenile doodles on them. And the other is the exact same thing. Really poor construction. One dot of cheap glue holding the covers onto the text block so that these things don't stand up. You won't probably crack the spine, but you will definitely dislodge the whole of the front and back cover and the spine apparatus from the block of text with a read of these things. Even a gentle read. Let's see here. Then, okay, out of order, we have a fantasy sequel. This is Patricia McKillip, Heir of Sea and Fire. Another Michael K. Dow K. Sweet cover. Only here you have him when he was earning his keep, when he was giving you an evocative fantasy cover, not just a bunch of people standing around. But why is the sequel here without any of the other books? Same thing with the Kevin O'Donnell book. Where are all the others? Okay. Then we have Frank Spearing's book, Prince Jack, in which he posits that Prince Albert Victor was Jack the Ripper. I found a copy with the cover ripped off a million years ago. I made my own cover. Prince Albert Victor was not Jack the Ripper. but nevertheless, he has a weird, hallucinogenically urgent time trying to convince you. Okay, then we have something for Garbus. This is John B. West's Bullets Are My Business. I think I talked about this for a video for Garbus, just a thin little men's brainless action adventure thing. We have Harold Lamb did a whole bunch of really popular biographies, novelistic biographies or biographical novels. Bookstores, even when these were coming out new, had a hard time knowing where to put them because they don't seem like, actual biographies. But Harold Lamb did a whole bunch of them, and they were all really popular. I have the one of his on Alexander the Great, but he did a bunch. He did. I wonder if this will give me a list. He did one on Genghis Khan, Omar Khayyam, Suleiman the Magnificent, Theodore and the Emperor, Cyrus the Great, Hannibal. He did a whole bunch. What I wouldn't give to find them all. I know that at one point, who did this? Doesn't say. Is this Fawcett? At one point, a publisher brought out all of them with this cover artwork. All of them had this kind of cover artwork. Usually these had the ugliest covers. But I had, once upon a time, the Theodora book with this cover artwork, and the Alexander book, and the Alexander one is the only Harold Lamb that I have now. Let's see here. Okay, all right, this is another Garbus pick. This is The Executioner. This is Sicilian Slaughter, where Mac Bolan, the executioner, decides that if he's going to try and wipe out the mob, he should probably go to Sicily and get them at the beginning, get them cut this thing off at the root. Bullets fly everywhere. Okay, then we have a battered mass market paperback of Tarzan of the Apes with a Frank Frazetta cover. Ballantine did all of Tarzan in these black bordered mass market paperbacks with the numbers on the spine, and they had Frazetta do a whole bunch of cover artwork. Boris Vallejo also did a whole bunch of cover artwork, and they're really, really a beautiful set. I have that whole set elsewhere at Hyde Cottage. This, I just have Tarzan of the Apes just loitering around here on its own. I have no idea why. We have the book version of 1776, the play, but this is actually, this says that it's a book of the play, but I believe this came out as a result of the success of the movie in 1976, when the movie came out. I love the musical 1776. I know it by heart, as I do so many Broadway musicals. And this is just the text with a whole bunch of stuff notes by the authors that of where their historical sources were, and also a whole bunch of stuff that's typically taken out of both the play and the movie. Okay, then we have an old Penguin classic, a collection of profiles by Max Beerbohm. These are 7 men and 2 others in these old Penguin things. No idea why I got this. I love Beerbohm's prose. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was 50 cents or a quarter. Okay, we have book 3 of the Journeys of Migel Fen. There is our hero. He goes through one adventure after another in these books, and they are really, really good. You watch him grow up. When we meet him, he's just a tiny little baby who has flinger genes. And so he is sought after by a whole bunch of different characters, including both the far-being Retzglaren, who may or may not be God, and Milford Homrummy, who is the servant of someone who may or may not be Satan. There are a whole bunch of powers lined up that think Miguel Fen is far more important than just an ordinary flinger. And there is a giant extraterrestrial gastropod that comes to Earth on a perfectly valid tourist visa to look around when Miguel Fen is a little baby, and it eats him so that he is visible in the translucent stomach. The being does not want to hurt him. It just wants to consume him and then maybe leave. But that is an indication to anyone who may be watching that Miguel Fen may have a greater destiny. It just goes on from there. Then we have an old Tarzan book. This was owned by Mark Sandman, because he kindly carved his name on the cover in pen. This is Tarzan and the Lost Empire, with a terrific cover there. We have A Pliocene Companion by Julian May. This is a volume that is a companion to Julian May's quartet of books, originally a quartet of books about Pliocene exile. Science fiction series that I really like. I don't know why it's not remembered at all. It's not reprinted at all. I don't know. Maybe Julian May was canceled and I just didn't know about it. But the Pliocene exile series is a big sprawling story, and it has a lot of moving parts. So it makes sense that there would be a mass market companion to it. The irony being, of course, as is true with anything, the Barsoom companion, Edgar Rice Burroughs companion, a companion to Song of Ice and Fire. The irony is that if you are a fan of these things, you're not going to need the companion. And if you need the companion, well, then you're going to be lost when you read the books. The Pliocene Exile series is built around the idea that in a valley in France in the future, on Earth, is found a time portal that goes to the Pliocene epoch 6 million years ago. But it's a one-way trip. You don't come back. You can't go back into the portal once you get to the Pliocene France. You can't do that. You're stuck in the past. So it's a scientific curiosity, but not of much interest, of any practical interest, because no one can go exploring through it. But then, when word gets out, a certain group of people, a certain number of people in this idyllic future society decide they don't like how idyllic it is. They'd kind of like to rough it. It's not quite suicide. They would just like the ultimate getaway adventure. And so some of them do go through the portal, even though they know they can't come back. It's assumed that it will just decant them in the Pliocene, where there are gigantic mammals and, Australopithecines are running around. There are no humans, and no technology of any kind. Just a giant wild world. Mosquitoes that are as big as owls. Beavers that are as big as trucks. That sort of thing. For one reason or another, a whole bunch of characters do go through that portal. For one reason or another. Either because they want the challenge, or because they feel utterly depressed about their present world, or whatever. Maybe they're injured or disillusioned. And what nobody in the present knows, because it is a one-way trip, nobody knows that a group of aliens, 2 groups of aliens, in fact, crash-landed on Earth 6 million years ago and set up shop in southern France. So they have been systematically enslaving every human that comes through that portal. And no one knows this, of course, because millions of years have passed, and whatever happened to those aliens is long gone, long subducted by Earth's tectonic plates. And we follow a core group of characters through that portal and then get their adventures in that other world. Turns out they managed to have a lot of adventures despite that. Just a little more here. We don't have to go on forever. We couldn't go on. We couldn't barely do this whole shelf. This next one is a paperback of Don Camillo's Dilemma by Gianni GUI. These are stories of two-fisted Italian priest in the years immediately after World War II. He's in a tiny Italian village on the Po, and rules his village with a kind heart and a Christian message, but also with fairly iron will, and he is combated the whole time in all of these stories. These are so utterly delightful. By the town's communist mayor, Peponi, who is just like Don Camillo. He is gigantic and has shovels for hands and doesn't take no for an answer. And they are constantly butting heads with each other, constantly fighting each other. Think Map and Lucia from the Benson novels. Only two expatriate guys in a small Italian village. And the kind of referee the whole time, although he never speaks to anybody but Don Camillo, he certainly doesn't speak to Peponi, is Jesus Christ. The carving of Jesus Christ on the crucifix above the big altar in Don Camillo's church will occasionally talk to Don Camillo and remind him of his Christian precepts. And you might think, well, what a way to put your thumb on the scale, but Jesus is more often critical of Don Camillo than he is of anybody else. But you know better. What are you doing? Oh, knock that off, that sort of thing. And these are, the reason that I can't help but smile is because these are utterly delightful. They are just wonderful. Don Camillo, Guara, she wrote a whole bunch of these, and I have a whole bunch of them, and they are much like the Map and Lucia books, or the Jeeves and Wooster stories by P.G. Wodehouse, or just a tiny handful of other things that you could mention. There are a tiny handful of books, of characters or worlds like this. I would add Rumpole of the Bailey by John Mortimer, that they move away from being books and move more properly into being places. And places that never change, and places that are always wonderful. Places that will always pick you up if you go to visit them. So I'm glad I have this paperback, although I don't know what it's doing out here. All my Don Camillo stuff, I thought, was in the little book room, but apparently not. Okay, then we have a battered copy of Arthur C. Clarke. This is Dolphin Island. I doubt that I could read this. Look at the shape that it's in. I doubt that it would survive even one reading. Let's see here. Okay, we have Lester Del Rey, the famous science fiction editor, is also a famous science fiction writer. Once upon a time, he's not remembered now, but once upon a time he was a famous writer, short story writer, a novel writer. This is a book of his called The 11th Commandment, a dystopian world in which the church takes over, or regains control, I guess would be more appropriate to put it. I'm not a big fan of Del Rey as a prose artist, but then again, at the time that he was writing these things, that he was churning out his stories and his novels, the quality of the prose was honored in the breach. Most editors would say, of course, that's what I'm looking for, but they were willing to pay you your $50 if you got the whiz-bang factor across. And he was the same way. You can't visit that well without drinking from it. So his books are enjoyable. They're enjoyable. My only cardinal sin, I guess, when it comes to science fiction is that when I say things like that about Lester Del Rey or a bunch of other science fiction writers from the pulp era, that, you know, they get the whiz-bang factor right, so it's enjoyable. I'd say the same thing about Arthur C. Clarke. The cardinal sin that I have, apparently, is when I say that I think the same thing about James Blish. Apparently, you're not supposed to think that about James Blish. I'm going to have to retool that if I revisit science fiction in a major way. Then we have fantasy. This is John Myers Myers. This is his great novel, Silverlock. One of many, many covers that this thing has. I absolutely love this book, but I don't know that I could get through this mass market is in really good shape, but I don't know that I could get through it without destroying it. Better by far to use the ebook. Okay, then a brain buster of a book. This is Umberto Eco. This is Foucault's Pendulum. Weird novel, even by this author's standards. He, of course, will be famous to you for the book The Name of the Rose. Jason Harrigan, who pops in and out of BookTube regularly, he once upon a time was promising a definitive read-through of this book. He knows it better than anybody. And there are things to know. This is very much a puzzle monkey book. So the more you delve into it, the more you'll find waiting for you. It's not accidental. Eco put a lot of stuff into this book, a lot of folds and refolds and twists and turns and games. Not in an arrogant or a condescending way, just in the way that if you have a gigantic brain and you want to write a book like that, this is what you would do. And I was looking forward to that read-through. It never happened. It was announced immediately before one of Jason's periodic disappearance from book 2. But it did spur me to reread the book, and I found a whole bunch of stuff in it that I hadn't seen the first time. I read it when it first came out in English. But I didn't find the world and everything in it, and I got, for the first time ever, I got the impression that maybe the world and everything in it is in the book. And I just need to maybe read it again, or maybe read up on it. We have a big fat... Oh, right. This is a big fat mass market of Chesapeake by James Michener, with a famous cover there. Not really sure. No one's done the big biography of Michener that he really deserves, so I'm not really sure. I have the impression that this was his best-selling book, which is no small feat, because 10 of his books, or 11, were massive bestsellers. But I think this did better than any of them. I'd have to check on that. I don't know what kind of primary sources or research anyone's ever done on the man who for 10 years was the best-selling author in America. You'd think that would warrant a biography now and again, or something. Maybe there has been some research and I just don't know about it. I have the strong impression that his archive, the boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of primary documents, letters, drafts, and whatnot, I have the strong impression that that archive is never touched by any researcher. That they haven't been visited by a prospective biographer, ever. I could be wrong about that, but this is terrific. It's the standard Michener model, where he takes a place and gives you long periodic flashes from its history. Brings those flashes alive, whether it's Poland or Hawaii or whatever. He does thread an overarching narrative throughout all that, but mainly it's designed to show you that place in all of its periods of history. Think The Pillars of the Earth. Something like that. This is much along those lines, although he set the pattern and everyone else imitates it. And his books are really, really good. Oh my God. Okay, all right. Well, this thing's even bigger. Good Lord. All right, this is Brandon Sanderson, The Way of Kings, in a mass market paperback, a guilty mass market paperback, because every time Sanderson comes out with a new book in the Stormlight archives, I look around and to reread at least the previous book, and every single time I realize I don't have them anymore. I don't know how that happens. I'm determined to hold on to this. Every single time that happens, I have to go hat in hand sheepishly to the publicist, and say, "Could you send me all the books, not just this latest one, but could you send me all of them?" So I have like the first 3 or 4 Stormlight archives in paperback, and I'm going to hold on to them with a grip of death so that I don't ever have to do that again. Then we have Vernor Vinge. This is his great book, Fire Upon the Deep, a great science fiction novel. A lot like Foucault's Pendulum in how imbricated it is, how dizzyingly complex it is. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. All right, then we have a whole bunch of books. These were done by Otto Penzler Books, back when the great editor and mystery impresario Otto Penzler had his own imprint line. He did a whole bunch of books. This is not all of them. I have 6 of them here. Yeah, 6. I think there were 10 or more. He did a whole bunch of books on Sherlockiana. One little book after another on either newly commissioned short stories about Sherlock Holmes or prose pieces about Sherlock Holmes, meditating on some aspect of the canon. And I have a whole bunch of them. I have Baker Street Studies. These are by some of the greatest Sherlockians of the day. I have 221B, Studies in Sherlock Holmes, by the great Vincent Starr. I have 17 Steps to 221B, which is an anthology. I have Baker Street Byways. And that's all these are. These are from the Sherlock Holmes library. No idea how many were eventually in this. Sherlock Holmes Fact or Fiction. Spoiler, fiction. Holmes and Company. You see, that is the and then we're back to Baker Street Studies. I love these things. Absolutely love them. I wish I found all of those all in one blast, and I wish I could find the others. I wish I could find more of them, because I know these almost by heart. But we should probably wrap this up. Yes, let's do a couple more, and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, we have Phoenix Prime by Ted White. What looks like cheesy science fiction with a Frank Frazetta cover, probably for Garb August or New World November. We have One for the Gods by Gordon Merrick, who wrote explicit gay mainstream fiction at a time when that should not have been possible. who were Avon should not have been signing off on these books and letting them go into bookstores, but it happened. It happened as if it were 2023 instead of 1983 or whatever. I hate to break it to her, but she can look as sultry as she wants. I don't think she's part of the equation. We have a mass market paperback of The Fire Pavilions by MMK. This was MMK's great big doorstop masterpiece. This author wrote a whole bunch of other really good historical fiction, but this was this was a phenomenon. And I have the mass market paperback because a whole generation of readers fell in love with this all-purple cover, this historical fiction cover. The hardcover of this tends to be too unwieldy. I see it from time to time, but it tends to be just impossible to maneuver. And I think I have this as an ebook. But the mass market paperback has a particular place in my heart. All right, just a few more here. Oh, we have an ace double that I did. I think I did this for June on the Range, Michael K. Vaughan's event celebrating Western novels. This is an ace double. One of them is A Hanging at Whiskey Smith, and the other is Stranger in Rampart. So that's how ace doubles work, whether it was westerns or mysteries or especially science fiction, is that you get two books. You just have to flip the book over. This was in not very good shape, although I think it would probably survive another read. Then we have Star Trek. This is Margaret Warner Bonanno. This is widely regarded as one of the best Star Trek novels ever written. This is Strangers from the Sky, with the cover there. That. Which is a weird and wonderfully touching story. In the end, a very touching story. It's got plenty of plot and intrigue, too, but it is touching about Earth's first contact with Vulcans. Just when did that happen? And just what form did it take? And why doesn't anybody remember the truth? And, of course, this came out decades before Star Trek Generations, or Star Trek First Contact, which shows on the movie screen Earth's first contact with Vulcans. So that becomes canonical. This is very different from that. Not the only fan, I'm sure. This came out in 1990. Is that right? 1987. I'm sure I wasn't the only fan who wished that this would be filmed. I still do wish that this would be filmed. And then we'll finish up with this one. What is this? Okay, this is an old pan paperback of A.H. Farrar Hockley's study of the song. Again, an original painting on the cover there. Terrific. Just terrific book. Not very long, certainly not the doorstop that the psalm tends to evoke now in more recent histories, but far more logistically informed. Hockley knows the ground. He knows how men work in combat. So it's far better than a lot of the later versions that are far more exhaustive. That's usually the trade-off that you have to have here, is that the earlier books will know the subject, but they won't have the benefit of all of the subsequent research. And then the later books will have the benefit of the subsequent research, but they won't know the subject, not intimately, not know in italics. So there you go. That is a weird sampling of some of the thousands of hardcovers that are out in this room. So, they are on this bookcase. They are on a million other bookcases. They are everywhere. They are not organized. They are not together. And they're not staying. So I'll wrap this up for now. There's just a random bookshelf tour. But I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.